We had a big presence here in Toronto, big office in World Trade Center in New York. I was there last week. We have bigger offices in London, Paris, and a few other places. But yeah, 16 offices. The platform is internet scale, which might not make sense unless I give you some figures. On any given day, we'll see over 500 billion requests, right? So 560, 570 billion requests. Each request is about 200 millisecond lifespan. So it's a very large, high throughput, but low latency platform. And in terms of metadata, how much are we getting and parsing each day? It's about 2 petabytes a day. So it's quite a large operation. Tell me a tough problem that you had and walk me through how you solved it, right? Like, tell me about a conversation you had to have with your boss. You knew it was going to be really hard. You knew he wasn't going to react well to it. How did you manage that? What was that like? Because then you get an insight into how are they looking at problem solving? How do they approach something that's high friction, high tension? And what's their tenacity levels like? Is this someone that's going to be able to work through it long term?
Welcome back to Tank Talks. I'm your host, Matt Cohen, and we've got a super exciting guest on today's show with Mayuran Yogarajah from Index Exchange. Now, Mayuran is a bit of a unicorn. Not just because he's super low key online, but because he's been at the same company for almost 25 years. In startup world, that's a very long time, basically unheard of. And today we're diving into how Mayuran helped build one of Canada's biggest ad tech success stories, from the early days of Casale Media to scaling Index Exchange into a global player in the programmatic advertising world. We also hear how Mayuran's career evolved from engineering into venture capital through IX Labs, and where he's helping fund the next generation of innovation off the balance sheet of Index Exchange. We get into some really cool topics, like how Index Exchange pioneered header bidding and stayed neutral and independent against giants like Google and Facebook, how they expanded into CTV and DOOA channels, how AI, privacy changes, and the death of third-party cookies are reshaping the ad tech industry, and some of the lessons Mayuran learned during his time in building up Index Exchange, and what's next for engineers and founders in the world that they're investing in right now. This was such a fun episode to record and learn more about one of Canada's most successful ad tech companies. Now let's jump into the tank for this week's episode with Mayuran. Thanks for joining us in the tank today, Mayuran.
Hey, Matt, good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Mayuran, you are a hard person to find any info on. And I have to admit, it may be because you have worked at the same company for almost 25 years now? Did I get that right?
22 years.
22 years. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. The company started in June of 2003. And I got in right at that time. So it'll be 22 years this coming June.
Okay, well, that makes sense. I'm sure most of our listeners have never even heard of your company, Index Exchange, but it is an incredible Canadian bootstrap success story. So I noted, obviously, on your profile, you're head of IX Labs, which we'll get into, but you're part of the founding team at Index Exchange and its predecessor, Casale Media. Can you tell us the origin story about Casale Media and how it got started?
For sure. So Andrew, our CEO and founder, he was once upon a time a publisher. So he had a team of writers. They would write about shows like Survivor, and he would publish articles on them. And, back in those days, you used to have a hit counter at the bottom of the websites. So you could track traffic. And then the ad networks took notice and they approached him and they said, hey, if you drop 5-6 lines of JavaScript, you can start making money off this. So that was kind of the genesis for initially Casale Media, and what would eventually become Index Exchange.
And what was the sort of thing that Andrew, was doing? Because there was a few years in between Casale Media and I believe the launch of Index Exchange, quite a few years. So what was Casale Media's business, I guess, for the first 10 years or so?
Yeah, so we started in June of 2003, and then I think we officially rebranded maybe 2014, 2015.
Yeah.
So initially we were an ad network, which meant that we worked with publishers and brands and marketers directly. And we managed everything through our platform, right? So all the demand was through us, advertising budgets, the creatives, click tracking, invoicing, POs, et cetera. Everything was through us. It was a full end-to-end service. And then I think it was around early 2009, 2010, something like that. There was an emergence of something called real-time bidding. And it was new technology at the time. There weren't any standards or any sort of protocols that anyone followed. But the idea was that you could have external demand come in to the current impression that's up for sale, right? So what used to happen before was the publisher would send us the impression to us through the JavaScript code that we gave them, and then we decided within our own set of ads that the advertisers have worked to upload ahead of time and set budgets and targeting, frequency capping, et cetera on. Now what's happening is, or what real-time bidding allowed for, was to have this external source of advertisers come in through what are called demand-side platforms, DSPs, right? So that's what the company eventually became. We became an ad exchange called Index Exchange. I would say the pivot was pretty interesting. Like when the company formed, it was not too long after the .com bubble, and there's a lot of lag around that, and then the pivot started happening not too long after the '08 financial crisis. So we've weathered a few of these big world events now. But yeah, it was from a technology standpoint, I would say it was an interesting pivot for us, because the business that we're in now, we deal in milliseconds, right? Like 1 millisecond is like a huge deal to us. So going from an internal base of advertisers and creatives and campaigns to externally coming and bringing them in, there's all kinds of challenges that brought, which was initially the tough part.
I mean, that's a big lift and shift for an entire organization, right? Because like you said, you're creating content, and then you went to this programmatic ad exchange network. So can you talk to us? You were the senior engineer. Obviously, you had to do a lot of that. Tell us about some of those pretty late nights I'm sure you had to endure into getting this thing right. And what happened when you hit the launch button?
Yeah. So by the time Andrew was creating content, he had already decided, because he was a publisher at the time, he had decided through his own frustrations in how we experienced the industry, that he wanted to dedicate a significant chunk of his time to try and solving some of this, right? And some of the challenges he had were lack of transparency, take rates were super high, et cetera. So that was the genesis for Casale Media. And then when I joined, it was ideas on paper. We would have stacks of paper. But it was a very memorable and fun time for me, because it was basically five or six guys sitting around in a room. There was constantly pizza all the time, constantly pop, and we would have servers everywhere. You have to remember, this was an era where I didn't have a cell phone. iPhones were not a thing. Google was not IPO'd yet. They were not public yet. The cloud didn't exist, so we just had servers,
racks and racks and racks,
and racks of servers. And there was a lot of fun moments. I would set up, we had all these systems running, and I would set it up so that if anything broke, you'd hear a cannon go off. So you had all these quirky little things that the engineering folks are doing. But yeah, it was a very memorable and pleasant time.
So again, you had this sort of lift and shift moment in the business, and it really took off. You haven't raised any capital ever, I believe. You've always been bootstrapped. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've been bootstrapped. We have never raised capital. We've been approached, but
of course,
we just haven't made that leap. Everything's been organic since the beginning.
Yeah, and you're across the world, large North America presence, EMEA, APAC region. You're one of the largest programmatic ad exchanges in the world. And you also have this sort of unique header bidding technology, right? That basically is this technology that allows multiple ad buyers to bid on inventory simultaneously, increasing competition and revenue for the publishers. Was that something that you were, spearheading at the organization?
It was. Header bidding was a very, very fun time for us. It was happening right around the time of the initial pivot of the company, when you had these external partners coming in as demand platforms. But header bidding at a high level is this concept that the way it used to work was you had the tags, the JavaScript tags, but you would set a floor price. So a publisher can say, I don't want less than $5 for this impression, right? So the way it used to work was if the original source couldn't meet that price, then they would go to a second source. So they call it the waterfall model. So it goes from one source to another. As you can imagine, each one could be like a second. So this is horrible for user experience. So header bidding was, and we didn't pioneer it. Like we're not the ones that created header bidding, but we certainly helped make it a household name. Header bidding was this concept that using existing features inside the ad server, you could then put in external demand at the same time.
Right.
So it was a pretty big deal at the time. It was pretty groundbreaking. I would say it took us to that next leap as a company in terms of growth.
Yeah. Well, talk to us about some of the growth. Like, how big is the company right now? How many offices? Can you give us some sense of scale?
Yeah. So we're now at just around 600, I would say, people globally, 16 offices worldwide.
16 offices worldwide.
Yeah, 16 offices. Yeah. So we had a big presence here in Toronto, big office in New York. We're at the World Trade Center in New York. I was there last week. We have bigger offices in London, Paris, and a few other places. But yeah, 16 offices. The platform is internet scale, which it might not make sense unless I give you some figures. But like on any given day, we'll see over 500 billion requests, right? So
Oh,
about
wow.
570 billion requests. Each request is about 200 millisecond lifespan. So it's a very large, high throughput, but low latency platform. And in terms of metadata, how much are we getting and parsing each day? It's about 2 petabytes a day. So it's quite a large operation.
Right. And you have an incredibly beautiful office that you were gracious enough to let us host an event at the Well. It's breathtaking, beautiful place that you guys have built. Tell us about like even why that was something you guys wanted to make a statement on.
Yeah, for sure. So we originally started in North York, near Dufferin.
As most tech companies did in the early 2000s.
Yeah. But one of the challenges that we had was every year I would ask our CEO, Andrew, like, how much are we hiring? And he would say, hire as many people as you can. Right? It was always the same answer. But part of the challenge that we had was because we were in such a remote location, the commute wasn't great. So we had decided, because we knew we were going to hire hundreds upon hundreds of people in the coming years. So we made an investment and we said, you know what, we're going to come downtown. It's going to be accessible through, transit and trains and all that. So yeah, that was a big part of why we came downtown. It was because we wanted to hire a lot more.
I got asked then, like, you've hired so many people. What's your favorite interview question over all these 22 years?
I used to ask people, I don't know if you remember this, like Google and folks like that back in the day, they would ask these really obscure questions like, you got stuck in a blender, what do you do? I used to ask those, but then I realized they don't really tell you much and it's not really all that informative. So I don't ask things like that anymore. I'm more so focused on like, tell me a tough problem that you had and walk me through how you solved it, right? Like, tell me about a conversation you had to have with your boss. You knew it was going to be really hard. You knew he wasn't going to react well to it. How did you manage that? What was that like? Because then you get an insight into how are they looking at problem solving? How do they approach something that's high friction, high tension, and what's their tenacity levels like? Is this someone that's going to be able to work through it long term?
Yeah. One of the questions I asked back in the day was like, tell me the most interesting thing you read in the newspaper today. And it was more a sense of like, do they have like a routine when they wake up in the morning? Do they read the news? Do they even care about the news? Are they focused on just like scrolling through their phone on Instagram every morning and then like just topping the office? It doesn't really tell you much, but it does tell you sometimes something interesting if they are reading something really fun and exciting. This was obviously when I was in finance. So there was probably a lot more in the news that was relevant for what my job was back then, versus what you're hiring for at Index Exchange, right?
It's a good question. We used to ask something similar. We would say, like, what's an interesting bug that you read about recently?
Yeah.
I don't know if we're still doing that though.
Okay.
It's a good idea.
Now you guys are at the Well. It's a beautiful spot. I have to ask, was there any internal conversations during COVID when you guys were all remote about whether or not this was the right decision?
No, we had planned that, we would eventually be back at office and
right.
We wanted to make the best of it in the meantime. And you know what? I think we handled COVID pretty well. We were not one of those companies that overly hired. We were not super aggressive in hiring when there was a lot of turnover. We were very like the way we operate is very fiscally conservative, right? Like we're very careful and cautious. Like we don't have venture capital money. We're working off our own growth. So I think we take very calculated risks, and we had planned that we would be back in office, and it was just a matter of when. And we got ownership, we got occupancy in the summer of 2022. So
Wow.
right around things are kind of opening up again.
That's pretty good, actually. Now, would you describe yourself as an ad executive?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think I generally think of myself as a tech guy, a techie, right? More than anything.
I agree. Ad tech executive. Maybe that's better.
Yeah.
Well, so you guys recently launched IX Labs, and I obviously love the concept behind it. For our listeners, explain how this culmination of Bootstrap, programmatic ad exchange, at the forefront of some pretty cutting edge ad tech technology, decides to get into the venture side of things, with your own capital as well.
Yeah, our own capital. No, we don't have LPs. Yeah, it was a conversation around, how do we see the company progressing? We had capital lying around. Our CEO was a big fan of Fortnite, and he had originally pitched, maybe we need to put more emphasis on different types of products, like have a spinoff. So I had taken that back. I thought about it, and I came back and I said, like, I've already done tech and product for a long time. And I pitched him on venture capital, and he said, "Hey, I think it's great. Let's do it." So that was kind of the genesis for it.
Sounds pretty simple.
I mean, there was a lot more that went into it beyond that, but the main thing was getting some buy-in, and I like that about him. He's willing to take on big, risky stuff, right? So
yeah,
it was a good conversation that we had, and then it was a matter of really trying to figure out the basics, right? Like I didn't come from finance. I didn't have that background. So it was really just trying to make the connections and trying to understand how the landscape even works.
I mean, ad tech and finance is pretty much the same thing. So you've got that nailed first off. But I mean, what's the thesis that you guys came to agree on? What did you want to see in terms of traction in the first first few deals? Like, how did you think about the execution of what you wanted to accomplish?
Yeah. So because our thesis has changed a few times, and I would say that it'll likely change again in the future, right? Like I'm leaning more towards just becoming generalist more than anything else. The one thing I do really like is the legacy industries. But like when we first started, we were looking a lot at health and fintech, and there were different reasons that we didn't move forward too much with those. But the reason that we like hardware and deep tech and hard tech is that we have a lot of experience in hard tech, right? Like we own and operate our own infrastructure. We're not on any public cloud. We have our own private cloud. So we've got a lot of background and history and experience with it. But I also realized in this process that there's a gap in hardware investors and hard tech investors. So it made a lot of sense from that lens as well. So
do you think there's a difference also being like 100% in control of your own kind of destiny with your own capital and your own balance sheet and team, while being along for the ride and being a minority investor at a much earlier, more sort of fragile type of, budding company? Because that's the sometimes that I find, operators turned investors from like traditionally scaled, bootstrap, large, corporations joining the sort of venture world. It's a mindset shift that is very hard to get comfortable kind of sitting back and watching while not jumping on the field and playing the game with them.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think, for us, it's like, it's kind of like we're watching them in some ways, right? Like we're kind of like the coach. I could watch the game over and over and over, but I might not be as good at them in their specific vertical. So
I can agree with that.
Right. So I try not to get like overly involved unless they ask me to, which is a different case.
Okay. So hard tech or hardware and deep tech, those are things that we don't see often in Canada as much. So where are you looking for stuff? Where do you want to find stuff? Will you go global? You guys have 16 offices around the world. Does that mean anyone in the offices can send stuff over?
Yeah, I mean, I mostly look at North America. So we do see a lot of deal flow from the US. But to answer your question, we can actually look globally, although that hasn't really been happening. We do get deals referred internally through the company as well, which is kind of cool.
And tell us about your team.
The venture side is just me. It's bootstrapped, true to form. I'm bootstrapping this and running it solo for now.
Okay. And what's the sort of time commitment that you have to split between this and your other role, or is this now the full-time focus for the group for yourself?
Yeah, this is my main focus for now. There's, I help out with a few things, including marketplaces, but this is my main focus.
And have you noticed that the founders that you have back, because you have backed a few companies, I'd love for you to share some of the ones that you're, most excited about, but have you noticed them looking to lean on you for certain aspects of, the experiences you've had at Index, or is it more just a general sounding board for anything that they are constrained or struggling with?
I think what's interesting for them is we've operated at a scale that they don't quite understand but want to get to, right?
Right.
Like internet scale company, hundreds of people. The engineering org was almost 200 at some point. So a lot of the conversations seem to be around just people, process, day-to-day stuff like that. It's really not too much about the tech.
That's good.
Yeah, I think a lot of the tech stuff has been generally straightforward. A lot of it because it's been through the cloud for most folks.
So is that because the stage of investments you're making, the companies have, tech built out, they've got some product already that you can de-risk and stuff. And so they need more help on maybe the cultural side, the hiring side, that stuff?
I think so. I mean, we generally look early stage, right? Pre-seed and seed. We look for some kind of working MVP.
Sure.
But like pre-revenue is okay. So we're totally cool with if you're pre-revenue, as long as we have some understanding of what your path to, generating revenue is.
So tell us about a company like Miro.
Yeah, Miro is great. Met them through the DMZ. A huge fan of DMZ. I love the work Abdullah and team are doing. But they were a great mix of hardware and legacy, right? Like once we spoke to them, that's when we started liking these legacy industries because we understood that there was so much potential in that space. But they've gone from, so to give you some context, they initially were making sensors that were used in commercial real estate, right?
Kind of like Apple tags?
It is, but specifically for bathrooms and in commercial real estate. So they would have consumables and people tracking and things like that. But they've actually pivoted to now becoming a lot more than that. So there is still hardware involved, but now they're doing everything from scope of work to quality assurance and even tying into like timesheets and all and the HR aspect. So yeah, they're doing quite well. We're very pleased with them.
Yeah, I mean, we had the founder speak at the panel. It was an incredible story. They're expanding into more payroll compliance and desk occupancy monitoring and workloading supply management, things like that. Very interesting how these legacy industry kind of wedges into these solutions. Expand pretty quickly because obviously once you build that trust with the enterprise customer, as we tell our companies all the time, you just need to find one good use case that you can nail 100% of the time, and then they'll start trusting you with some more features that they want built as well for the other things that they're struggling with, right?
I don't know if you had a chance to talk to Cole, but he came from the industry, so he used to work in the space, and he was explaining how everything was done on spreadsheets and paper and pen in many cases. So I love that aspect of the story as well, because he came from there, he saw it firsthand and was so frustrated that he decided, you know what, I just want to try and fix it. It's not unlike our CEO and founder, Andrew, as well. It's like he was in the space before.
Yeah. Now, would you describe yourself as a corporate venture fund, CVC?
Yeah, we're CVC.
Right. Structures like a CVC, off balance sheet, sort of not like the structured carried 80-20 like a traditional VC fund. It's really for the benefit of the organization. So what benefits are there that come from being a CVC, you think?
Well, I should mention we're a CVC, but unlike many CVCs, we're not strategic. We're mostly a diversification strategy, right? So for us, the benefit is mostly going to be financial. So we're looking to back interesting companies with really strong leaders and founders. And it's not meant to tie back into the overall ad business.
That's good. Financial, sponsors are great, obviously when they're along for the same motivations that we are as a traditional VC. It's when you have some of the strategics that are not really interested in the financial part as much as the strategic part, it becomes a little tricky to manage those early on, especially as the companies are really starting to build some cool technology. Switching back to Index for a sec. I mean, 25 years it's been around for almost, given 23?
Almost 22.
Okay. Why not go public?
I mean, for us, it's a matter of like, how are we? A lot of times people go public because they need the capital, right? Or they raise because they need the capital. They do something with it. I think for us, we're doing okay. We're growing very consistently, very conservatively, and we'll have to play it by ear and see how it goes. But
with no external investors, no need to go public, right? To kind of provide that liquidity. If you don't need to do it, don't do it. What about acquisitions, right? Like that's another reason why people go public.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, we've been approached in the past. Obviously, nothing's materialized, but
or for you to make other acquisitions, because the ad tech market is still pretty consolidated.
Yes, and to be fair, we have done one acquisition to date, but that was in 2023, I believe. So it was a company based out of Berlin.
Berlin. Okay. Yeah. Cause obviously, with Google Ad Manager, Big Magnite, I think it's called, the other largest independent SSP by revenue. And then you've got Pubmatic, early players like OpenX. There's still a few left out there on either side, but obviously you guys are making enough room for yourself to continue chugging along independently. I got to ask about AI, obviously, and how you're thinking about this and its impact on the ad tech market. We're seeing so much, on the creation side, the content creation side, the publishing side as well. What are your thoughts around what we're seeing today in AI and how it's specifically going to impact your business? And what ways are you guys even incorporating it on a daily basis now, from the tools and sort of the technology that you can touch and use in Index Exchange?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, we're definitely investigating all of those avenues. I would say, like yesterday, we had a demo from our chief architect on Claude Code, which is super fascinating, right? It's like you describe a few lines of wants, and then it just builds it for you. So I think it's going to change how we develop more broadly. A lot of the engineers are already using some form of Copilot to code along with. But what I would say is equally interesting is our broader ML efforts, right? We have this giant platform that's like 560, 570 billion requests, but that's the input to us. That's the request that we get. The marketers and brands, they don't want to see all that. They only want to see what's relevant to them. Right? And the buying platforms, DSPs, they don't want to have to deal with that scale. A lot of them are actually they only get a small portion of that, right? Like one DSP that we have only gets 1/1000th of what we get.
Wow.
So that's where a big emphasis within the company is going. It's our ML initiatives and our ML focus. And we're using neural nets for that. So we've been using Go ahead.
To have a better throughput, to have a better matching, essentially at faster rates?
Something like that. It's to really distill this giant data set into what's only important for certain buyers or for the buyers that are with certain DSPs. So to give you a concrete example, like we might be filtering out, or the DSPs might be filtering out a giant portion of what we send them now. Now, this is bad for a number of reasons. This is extremely expensive for them.
Yeah.
It's power, it's cooling, it's networking. Egress is a huge cost for everybody. And then they might factor that into their bidding algorithms as well, right? Like if we're the SSP that's sending them something that they're constantly passing on, then they might say, well, there could be a problem here. So we spend quite a bit of time trying to figure out and distill what we think is going to be useful and important for them. And for that, we've been using neural nets. And we're actually doing a rewrite. Our CTO and a few others, launched a new project. We might actually have to get a new cluster built for this. So We'll see where it
Really?
goes. Yeah, we'll see where it goes.
So tell us about the build out of these things. You're managing your infrastructure yourself, you said. Is that correct? And all around the world, I guess, in different areas you operate, I think it has to be, or no?
Yeah, we've got I think like 14 or 15 data centers globally,
Okay.
including several in North America and Europe, a few in APAC as well.
So how is I guess, global recession fears, interest rates, tariffs, all these things, how is that starting to impact your capital budget and how the team thinks about sort of allocating resources in the face of a bit of uncertainty around a lot of these things?
Yeah, so right now, because the tariffs have been generally applied towards products and not services, we haven't seen too much impact, but obviously that could change. And even with the products, like it could be the case that at some point it starts impacting ad spend, but we haven't seen that yet.
No.
But in terms of how are we planning for it? We generally have a few budgets that we work off, right? One is a bit more aggressive, one not so much, and there's a few in between. So we've got some measures in place if it comes to that in terms of like investment reductions or we're going to stop developing on certain products, but we haven't gotten there.
But what about on the cluster side, the hardware side, building out some of these data centers?
Yeah. Well, I think the cluster will be small initially, so I don't think there'll be too much of a big hit. I'm guessing like the space that we started off in North York, that's a data center now because we own that building.
Makes sense.
So there's about 5,000, 6,000 servers there. They're mostly data servers, housing things like Hadoop and Kubernetes. So it might just be there.
Got it. Very cool. Are you playing with any tools personally on the side, doing any vibe coding yourself?
I gotta say, I don't hear this talked about enough. I'm a big fan of Perplexity. I'm a huge fan of Perplexity, and I find that a lot of my Google searches are now going to Perplexity.
Did it get you back into coding at all? Like when you maybe had been more in a managerial role?
It did. It did at first. Yeah, it did because you suddenly. I mean, I think there's always a natural curiosity, right? Like to give you some context, we rewrote a big portion of our ad serving engine in 2022. And I think that allowed us to quickly build and bring to market even faster than before. So streaming, which is a non-trivial part of the business now, we didn't have that 2 years ago, right? Like it started 2 years ago, and now it's a big part of the business. Marketplace is same thing. So I think when those conversations are happening, you naturally get curious and you're like, okay, how would something like a Claude or Perplexity or ChatGPT look at a coding problem? I've dabbled in it, but I need to put more time behind it.
And would you take a bit of a page from Toby from Shopify's mindset about how now every employee, at Index Exchange should be playing with these tools before asking for more budget and resources to know if they could do them more efficiently with an AI tool sidekick?
I mean, we're having those conversations now at the executive level. I think once we have something decided, then we'll share with the broader teams. But I think the idea will be, you have to use AI in some form.
Okay. I mean, you've been doing this for 22 years and you're still motivated, it seems like, to find, new and exciting technologies to work with. What else keeps you motivated to keep going besides IX Labs and Perplexity?
I mean, honestly, I would be remiss if I didn't say marketplaces. It's a huge focus in the company right now. I think it's going to define the next maybe 5 to 10 years of ad tech. Marketplaces is this. It's this understand. Like in order to understand marketplaces, I have to explain the current market and how things work now. Right? It's like we get the request sent to us for impressions. We're the intermediary. We go to get demand from the DSPs. A lot of value add, a lot of value creation. So like creative, the bidding platforms, the AI algorithms, the data vendors, et cetera. A lot of those are sitting on the buy side. They sit with the demand side platforms, right? So marketplaces is really us from a supply standpoint saying we can also add value beside what the DSPs are doing. So it's going to even things out a little bit as we bring some of those services onto the intermediary, the middle layer like us.
What would you say you're most proud of during your 22-year career at Index?
I don't know if there's a specific thing, but like one thing I'm really happy about within the company culture is there's this general sense of like urgency all the time, which I don't always see even in startups, right? Like we've done a pretty good job of really being alert and always, ready to fight. We're very scrappy. We're always ready to fight, ready to pivot. And that was like that's very challenging to get culturally correct, I would say, because I've seen it where we've lost it and I've come back to it now. So that's something I'm super proud of. I think we've got a pretty generally good culture. The average tenure here is over 5 years. We have people here that have been here 10, 15 years. So I think we're doing something right.
How did you guys lose the urgency and bring it back? What did you do to bring it back?
I think we lost it. Like one of the biggest learnings for me was when we were growing through that hyper growth phase, we were hiring so many that I grew the engineering org bottom up, meaning that I hired a lot of, level one, junior engineers, and we didn't have that upper management executive there. And, it caused a lot of problems in terms of, like growth and like management, properly managing people, like, they need oversight and, you have to tend to their needs as well and make sure that, their questions are being answered and generally being well taken care of. That was something that we didn't do well. And I think that took a little bit of time to sort of correct. But I also think that, growing the other layers, you have to scale very methodically and thoughtfully because you don't want to add too many layers.
Right.
Because every time you add a layer, it slows things down. And that's where you lose some of that sense of urgency. At least that's been my experience. I don't know what it's like in other companies.
Yeah, the manager maker problem, right? Just hiring too many managers before you have enough makers underneath, but hiring too many makers and not enough people to manage them is also a very fine line. So how did you bring it back though?
We brought on really good leaders, and
right.
They did a great job of just setting a very good tone and expectation, and now we've got a very, very healthy balance, and it's partly why we're able to build and bring things to market.
And how do you bring culture to the entire organization globally? Do you guys do global offsites? Have you guys done anything where all the teams have come together from around the world? That'd be pretty special.
We used to do these things once a year. We would fly everybody down. Last one we did was in 2019, but
where'd you go?
Oh, these were in Toronto.
Okay.
We've done some in New York as well, but like these were like the 3-4 day events. We would have external speakers. Like I interviewed Alexis Ohanian once in front of everybody. We interviewed Wayne Gretzky, Steve Ballmer. So
Cool.
these were major events that we used to do. Now, I would say post-COVID, we haven't been doing something that big. We do company kickoffs. So mid-January, all the execs speak and they set their vision for the year and what we're trying to do and how we're going to accomplish it. But how do you keep engagement? I would say is more that we over communicate, right? So we have a good culture of sharing information. For instance, we do biweekly town halls where there's not only a lot of prepared content, but there's also Q&A and even live Q&A, so you can ask anything you want. And we think that goes a long way in terms of just keeping people engaged and keeping them informed of what's happening in the company.
What was Steve Ballmer like? As crazy in person or pretty calm?
I think there were moments where he was a little bit less calm. I think he's like that in general. He's high energy. He's like a big ball of energy. But yeah, great experience, right? Like to have come from so many years at Microsoft, it's pretty remarkable.
Wow, that is so fascinating. Okay, and last question before we jump into our fast favorites. If you had like a magic wand to change one thing about the ad tech industry in general, what would it be and why?
We have this product at Index called Client Audit Logs, and really this is our main driver towards transparency. It's us saying, take our logs, do whatever you want with it, put it into your BI tools, put it into Snowflake or Datadog or whatever, and it's great for us because everyone gets to see, all the clients get to see exactly what's going on in an auction, who's doing what, who's taking what. I think that sort of transparency in the industry could be could be welcomed by a lot of our clients.
Yeah, it sounds like that's something that people really trust you for. It's that you are, unlike Google, you guys don't own any media properties or data. And that's appealing to like publishers looking for a transparent partner, which is why you guys have been so successful, right?
I think we've got a pretty strong brand. There's definitely a strong emphasis of trust that we carry, and people come to rely and trust upon us. Speaking of Google, big news today. I don't know if you saw regarding the third-party cookie. It looks like it's been they're going to leave it for now. So I think a lot of folks collectively are sort of breathing breathing a little bit more.
I would say so. Just to live to fight another day against the Giants. Before we wrap things up, we always ask our guests for their fast favorites. So first off, your favorite podcast.
I've been watching. I listen to this at least once or twice a week. The Morning Brew. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Of course, we had Austin Reef on the podcast.
Oh, you did? That's amazing.
We had him on. I'm an LP in his small fund, and he's he's awesome.
That's great amazing. Podcast. I didn't even know that.
He's no longer there. He just stepped down as CEO. But yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, so that's my favorite podcast.
Nice. Next is your favorite newsletter or blog.
Newsletter or blog. I tend to read TechCrunch quite a bit. I don't know if that counts. Like it's good source.
An oldie but a goodie, sure.
Oh, yeah. Yes, it's a staple.
We'll have to get you on some better ones to stay up to date on better VC news than that. Next is your favorite tech gadget.
I don't know if this counts. This isn't really tech, but I've bought what's called the walking pad. Do you know what that is?
Yeah. Is that like the treadmill, like little thin one? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's like a mini treadmill because I'm going through this healthy phase of my life where I'm trying to eat clean and exercise a lot. And
nice.
And part of that is hitting 10,000 steps a day. So that definitely helps out.
Good for you. So how small really is it? It's like it folds up, or just like it's so small you can get like 2 steps on it?
No, it folds up. So what I tend to do is on the days that I know I'm not going to get the steps, I'll just go put on Netflix and walk for like an hour.
Very cool. And you can move it anywhere. It's not that heavy?
Yeah, it's very small. It's not heavy at all, so you can move it.
Nice. Okay, next is your favorite new trend.
Favorite new trend. I don't know. This isn't my favorite new trend, and it's something that I actually dislike.
Okay.
I notice a lot of people are going to Othership. I don't know if this is like this is like a very common thing now. For me, it's like I'm more of a fan of cold showers. Like I've done cold showers. I'm comfortable with it. I don't get the appeal of people constantly going to Othership. I only mention it because everybody's talking about it.
So is your kind of anti-trend, is it that it's the group setting of taking a hot sauna and a cold tub together, or the cold tub itself independently?
I think it's a bit of both.
A bit of both, but you like the cold showers.
I know, but it's not, it's only for like, it's so convenient, right? Because like you're there.
Fair enough. I have a cold tub in my house and a sauna, so I definitely agree with you. I'm not going there. Robbie's a good guy, but that's fun. I would do it independently, I'd say. I don't need to sweat with 40 people. And next is your favorite book.
My favorite book. I don't know if this is my favorite, but I read a book, I think this was in 2019, called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Bleep.
Fuck, you can say it. Yeah, that's a great book. Yeah. Do you remember like a lot about it?
I don't. I'm actually going to reread it now that it's on my mind. But I remember when I read it thinking like, I'm just glad someone's saying these things. Like it makes a lot of sense. And
so Mark Manson is the guy who wrote it. And it's awesome. It's a great book about just kind of being indifferent to everything, but rather care deeply about what actually matters, right? So not all problems are equal. Happiness comes from solving problems. Choose your values wisely. You're not special, kind of thing. Be human. Humility. And also like the biggest takeaways are like failure is the path to growth, right? So it's a great book. Yeah. Oldie, but a goodie.
I'll have to reread it. It's a good one.
Yeah. Awesome book. And last but not least, your favorite life lesson.
I generally try to just have a lot of gratitude in life. It's like you wake up, you're alive, you're breathing, you're healthy. I just try to operate from that mindset. It's not a life lesson, but it's more of like an outlook than anything else.
No, absolutely. It makes total sense. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us in the tank today with Mayuran Yogarajah from Index Exchange and IX Labs.
Thanks for having me, Matt.